The blood-red sun dipped below the jagged horizon as Leona Blackwell stumbled from the stagecoach, her silk dress torn and stained from the arduous journey across the unforgiving Nevada territory. Tonopah, 1882. A mining boomtown with silver in its veins and prejudice in its heart sprawled before her like a mirage, its wooden buildings and saloons promising nothing but hostility to a woman with secrets. "Last stop, madam," the driver called, tossing her weathered trunk onto the dusty ground. "Welcome to Tonopah." Welcome was hardly the word. Leona clutched her mother's locket around her neck, the only remnant of her life back east, and surveyed the town that was meant to be her sanctuary. After her father's financial ruin and subsequent death, and her fiancé's betrayal upon discovering her family's sudden poverty, Tonopah represented her last hope, a teaching position arranged through correspondence with the town council. Men in dusty hats paused their conversations to stare as she collected her belongings. Women whispered behind gloved hands, appraising her travel-worn appearance with suspicion. Leona lifted her chin, refusing to show weakness despite the trembling in her knees. "Miss Blackwell." A stern-faced woman approached, her gray hair pulled tight beneath a modest bonnet. "I'm Mrs. Patterson, head of the town council. We were expecting you yesterday." "The stagecoach encountered difficulties near Carson City," Leona explained, extending her hand. "A broken wheel delayed us considerably." Mrs. Patterson ignored the outstretched hand. "I see. Well, there's been a change of circumstances. The teaching position is no longer available." The words hit Leona like a physical blow. "But your letter confirmed. That was before we learned certain details about your background." Mrs. Patterson's voice dropped to a hush. "Word travels, Miss Blackwell, even from Philadelphia. We cannot have someone of your questionable heritage teaching our children." Leona's breath caught. Her mother's Cherokee blood, the secret that her father had kept hidden in high society, had somehow reached Tonopah before she did. "I assure you, my qualifications remain the same," Leona said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Qualifications aren't everything, Miss Blackwell. This is a respectable town with standards to maintain. Half-breeds don't belong here." The slur stung more than the rejection itself. Around them, a small crowd had gathered, faces hard with judgment. "I've traveled nearly 2,000 miles, Leona protested. "I've sold everything to come here." "That's hardly our concern," Mrs. Patterson replied coldly. "The next stagecoach leaves tomorrow morning. I suggest you be on it." A man pushed through the gathering crowd. "What's happening here, Mrs. Patterson?" Leona turned to see a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. He stepped forward, revealing a weathered face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His eyes, blue as a summer sky, assessed the situation quickly. "Nothing that concerns you, Mr. Forster," Mrs. Patterson replied stiffly. "Doesn't look like nothing." He turned to Leona. "I'm Dawson Forster, and you are?" "Leona Blackwell," she replied, fighting back tears of frustration. "Your new school teacher, or at least I was supposed to be." Dawson Forster frowned. "The position the town's been trying to fill for months. The one we desperately need." "The circumstances have changed," Mrs. Patterson insisted. "Miss Blackwell isn't suitable." "Not suitable." Dawson looked Leona over, noting her educated bearing despite her travel-worn appearance. "Why's that?" When Mrs. Patterson hesitated, a man from the crowd called out, "She's part Indian, got it from her mother. News came on yesterday's mail coach." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Leona stood rigid, humiliation burning her cheeks but refusing to lower her gaze. "Is that true?" Dawson asked quietly. Leona lifted her chin. "My mother was Cherokee. She died when I was a child. I was raised in Philadelphia and educated at the finest ladies' seminary. I assure you, I am more than qualified to teach your children." "Well, that settles it then," Dawson said, turning to face the crowd. "She's qualified." "It most certainly does not settle it," Mrs. Patterson sputtered. "The council has decided. The council decided to hire a teacher," Dawson cut in. "You've got one standing right here. Unless you'd prefer the children go another year without proper schooling. Mr. Forster, you may own the largest ranch in the county, but you don't run this town, Mrs. Patterson said coldly. "No, but I do employ half the men in it," Dawson replied evenly. "And my taxes pay for that schoolhouse." He turned to the gathered townspeople. "Miss Blackwell came here in good faith. She's educated and willing to teach our children. What more are we looking for?" "Someone who belongs here," someone called out. Dawson's expression hardened. "She is part of us now. Anyone who says otherwise can take it up with me." The declaration hung in the air like a challenge. Leona stared at this stranger who had stepped forward to defend her when no one else would. "This isn't over, Forster," Mrs. Patterson warned before turning on her heel. As the crowd dispersed, Dawson turned to Leona. "Don't mind them. They'll come around." "Why would you do that?" Leona asked, bewildered by his intervention. "You don't know me." "I know we need a teacher," he said simply. "And I know what it's like to be judged before you've had a chance to prove yourself." He picked up her trunk. "Come on. I'll take you to Mrs. Rodriguez's boarding house. She's got a room for rent that'll suit you fine." Leona hesitated, then followed him down the dusty main street. "They won't accept me, Mr. Forster." "Call me Dawson," he replied, "and give them time. Tonopah's rough around the edges, but there are good people here." "You seem very certain." Dawson paused, his expression softening. "My mother always said stubbornness was my defining trait. I'd like to think she meant determination." His eyes met hers. "Don't give up before you've started, Miss Blackwell." "Leona," she corrected, offering a tentative smile. "And I'm not one to give up easily, Mr. Forster. Determination runs in my blood, too." For the first time since arriving in Tonopah, Leona felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this dusty silver town could become home after all, if only because one man had been willing to stand between her and those who would cast her out. The boarding house run by Mrs. Rodriguez stood 3 blocks from the main street, a humble 2-story structure with a small front porch adorned with potted cacti. Unlike the cold reception at the stagecoach, Mrs. Rodriguez greeted Leona with warmth that transcended the language barrier between them. "My English not so good," the older woman apologized, her accent thick but her smile genuine. "But room very good, clean sheets." Her son was taught by the previous teacher, Dawson explained as they climbed the narrow staircase. "Miguel's the brightest kid in town now. Heading to university in California next year if all goes well." Mrs. Rodriguez beamed with pride. "Teacher very important. Tonopah need you." The room was modest but clean, a narrow bed, a washstand, a small writing desk beneath a window overlooking the town. Leona felt tears of relief threatening as she realized she wouldn't be forced to leave on tomorrow's stagecoach after all. "School starts Monday," Dawson said, setting down her trunk. "That gives you 3 days to settle in. I'll introduce you to some folks tomorrow who'll support you." "Why are you helping me?" Leona couldn't help but ask again. Dawson's expression grew distant. "My wife was Paiute. Catherine died 3 years ago in childbirth, along with our son." He said it simply, but Leona could see the grief still etched in the lines around his eyes. "I've seen how this town can treat those they consider outsiders. It isn't right." Leona understood then his defense of her wasn't merely kindness, but a stand against the same prejudice that had touched his own life. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. Dawson nodded, then changed the subject. "The schoolhouse needs some work. I'll round up some men to help get it ready before Monday." After he left, Leona sank onto the bed, exhaustion from the journey and emotional turmoil washing over her. She had come to Tonopah with hope for a new beginning, only to find the same prejudices that had shadowed her family in Philadelphia. But unlike in Philadelphia, where her father had hidden their heritage to maintain their social standing, here she would stand in her truth with at least one ally at her side. The following morning, Leona awoke to the sounds of Tonopah coming to life, wagons rumbling past, distant hammering from the mines that fueled the town's existence, voices calling in English and Spanish. She dressed carefully in her most professional attire, a navy blue skirt and white blouse with her hair pinned neatly back. If she was to win over this town, she would need to present herself impeccably. Mrs. Rodriguez provided a simple breakfast and directions to the schoolhouse. "Many children excited," she assured Leona. "Not everyone think like Mrs. Patterson." The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a single-room building with peeling white paint and windows in need of washing. As Leona approached, she could see Dawson's tall figure directing several men who were making repairs to the porch steps. "Good morning," she called, feeling unexpectedly nervous as all eyes turned to her. Dawson tipped his hat. "Miss Blackwell, thought you might want to see your new kingdom." One of the men spat tobacco juice onto the ground. "Don't see why we're fixing up the place for the children of Tonopah," Dawson interrupted firmly. "Unless you'd prefer, your boy Tommy grows up unable to read his own name, Jenkins." The man fell silent, returning grudgingly to his work. "Don't mind Jenkins," Dawson said as he led Leona inside. "His bark is worse than his bite." The interior was dusty but promising, rows of simple desks, a larger desk at the front, and a blackboard that spanned the wall. Bookshelves stood mostly empty, save for a few tattered textbooks. "It's not much," Dawson admitted. "Town's resources go to the mines first, but we scraped together funds for new books. They should arrive next week." Leona ran her fingers along the teacher's desk, envisioning the space filled with eager young minds. "It's perfect. It just needs some care." "Like most things in life," Dawson agreed, watching her with a thoughtful expression. They spent the morning cleaning the schoolhouse together. Dawson proved to be more than just a rancher. He was educated, well-spoken, and possessed a dry wit that made the work pass quickly. By noon, when the men working outside had departed, the interior was transformed, floors swept, surfaces dusted, windows gleaming. "Thank you," Leona said as they shared a simple lunch of bread and cheese on the schoolhouse steps. "For everything." "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't spoken up yesterday," Dawson shrugged. "You'd have found another way. You strike me as resourceful, perhaps, but it would have been a much lonelier battle." She hesitated, then asked, "Will the parents actually send their children to me?" "Some will right away. Others might need convincing." Dawson's expression grew serious. "I won't lie to you, Leona. It won't be easy, but I think you'll win them over one family at a time." "And Mrs. Patterson, some minds can't be changed," he admitted, "but her influence has limits." As they spoke, a wagon approached the schoolhouse. A woman with 2 young children peered out cautiously. "That's Sarah Miller," Dawson explained quietly. "Her husband works for me. Their children haven't had proper schooling since they arrived last year." Leona straightened her skirt and stood as the wagon stopped. The woman approached cautiously while the children, a boy of about 8 and a girl perhaps 6, watched wide-eyed from the wagon. "Mr. Forster," Mrs. Miller nodded, before turning uncertain eyes to Leona. "You must be the new teacher." "Leona Blackwell," she confirmed, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Miller." The woman hesitated before accepting the handshake. "I heard what happened yesterday. My husband said you'd still be teaching." "That's right," Dawson confirmed. "School starts Monday." "My Jacob and Emma need learning," Mrs. Miller said, glancing back at her children. "Reading especially. My Jacob, he tries, but the letters get all mixed up for him." Leona recognized the description of what some educators called word blindness. "I've worked with children who see letters differently," she assured the woman. "There are techniques that can help him." Mrs. Miller's expression softened slightly. "You've taught children like that before. In Philadelphia, yes. Every child deserves an education tailored to their needs." The woman studied Leona's face. "My grandmother was Shoshone," she said suddenly, her voice dropping. "Nobody here knows, we don't speak of it." The confession hung between them, an offering of solidarity, of understanding. "Your children will be welcome in my classroom," Leona promised. "And your family's secrets are safe with me." Mrs. Miller nodded, tension visibly leaving her shoulders. "We'll be here Monday morning," she said before returning to her wagon. As they drove away, Leona turned to find Dawson watching her with a small smile. "What?" she asked. "You just won your first allies," he said. "By Monday, Sarah will have told at least 3 other mothers about your experience with children who struggle with reading. One family at a time," Leona repeated his earlier words. "Exactly." He gathered their lunch things. "Now, I promise to introduce you to some folks who will support you. Are you ready to face more of Tonopah?" The remainder of the afternoon was a whirlwind of introductions. Dawson took her to the general store, where the owner, Mr. Sullivan, greeted her cordially if not warmly. At the town's small newspaper office, the editor, a forward-thinking man named Howard Gibson, promised to announce her arrival as the town's new teacher in positive terms. They visited the doctor, the blacksmith, and finally the modest church where Reverend Collins offered cautious welcome. "Judge not, lest ye be judged," the Reverend quoted when Dawson bluntly addressed the issue of Leona's heritage. "Your qualifications speak for themselves, Miss Blackwell, though I cannot promise all my congregation will share my view." By evening, Leona was exhausted but encouraged. For every cold shoulder there had been a hand extended in welcome. For every suspicious glance, a smile of acceptance. "One last stop," Dawson said as the sun began to set. "My ranch isn't far. I'd like you to meet my daughter." The Forster Ranch lay 2 miles outside of town, a sprawling property marked by a wooden arch bearing the name Silver Creek. Unlike the ostentation of many wealthy ranchers, Dawson's home was practical and welcoming, a large main house built of sturdy logs with a wide porch wrapping around its perimeter. As they approached, a girl of about 10 burst through the front door, her dark hair flying behind her as she ran to meet them. "Papa," she cried, throwing herself into Dawson's arms. "You were gone all day." "Had important business, Lily girl," he replied, swinging her up despite her age. "I want you to meet someone very special. This is Miss Blackwell. She's going to be your new teacher." The girl turned curious eyes to Leona. Lily Forster had her father's blue eyes, but her features hinted at her Paiute heritage, high cheekbones and straight black hair that gleamed in the fading sunlight. "Hello, Miss Blackwell," she said with surprising poise. "Are you really going to teach us?" "I am indeed," Leona replied. "And I'm very much looking forward to having you in my class." Lily studied her with the directness only children can manage. "Mrs. Patterson told Aunt Martha that you're an Indian. Is that true, Lily?" Dawson admonished, setting her down. "It's all right," Leona assured him before addressing the girl. "My mother was Cherokee. That makes me part Cherokee too." "Like I'm part Paiute," Lily said matter-of-factly. "That's right." Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Then you're like me and Papa, that's good." She took Leona's hand with the easy acceptance of childhood. "Come see my pony. His name is Thundercloud." Over Lily's head, Leona's eyes met Dawson's, both sharing a moment of understanding about the simple wisdom of children, untainted by the prejudices adults carried. Dinner at the Forster Ranch was a revelation, not just in the quality of food prepared by their housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, but in the warm family atmosphere. Martha Forster, Dawson's sister who had come to help raise Lily after Catherine's death, proved to be an educated woman with progressive ideas. "This town needs shaking up," Martha declared over dessert. "Too set in their ways. A school teacher with fresh perspectives is exactly what the children need." As dusk settled over the ranch, Dawson drove Leona back to town in his wagon. The night air was cool, stars emerging in a sky unmarred by city smoke. "Thank you for today," Leona said as they traveled. "You've made what could have been an impossible situation manageable." Dawson kept his eyes on the road. "I know what it's like to face this town's judgment. When I married Catherine, half my business associates refused to deal with me. Even now, some folks treat Lily differently. She seems remarkably well adjusted." "Children are resilient when they are loved," he replied, "but it's not always easy for her." They fell into comfortable silence until they reached the boarding house. Dawson helped her down from the wagon, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. "I'll see you at church tomorrow," he said. "Reverend Collins might have trouble on his hands if Mrs. Patterson decides to make a stand, but showing up is important." "I'll be there," Leona promised. "I didn't come all this way to hide." The following morning, Leona dressed in her finest Sunday attire, a pale blue dress with modest lace at the collar, her mother's locket at her throat. Mrs. Rodriguez walked with her to the small white church at the center of town, offering silent solidarity as they entered together. The congregation turned almost as one to stare as Leona took a seat in the back pew. She could hear the whispers, see the nudges, but kept her eyes focused forward with dignity. When Dawson arrived with Lily and Martha, they made a point of sitting beside her, Lily slipping her small hand into Leona's as if they were already friends. "Courage," Dawson whispered, his shoulder brushing against hers reassuringly. Reverend Collins, to his credit, delivered a sermon on acceptance and community that could hardly have been better timed. Though he never directly addressed the controversy, his pointed Bible passages about judging others left little doubt about his position. As the service ended and the congregation filed out, Mrs. Patterson deliberately cut across their path, several town council members in her wake. "Mr. Forster," she said coldly, "the council has called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. The matter of the school teacher will be properly addressed." "I wasn't aware the council had the authority to overturn a contract already offered and accepted," Dawson replied calmly. "But I'll be there to remind you." The confrontation might have escalated had Lily not spoken up. "Mrs. Patterson, did you know Miss Blackwell can speak 3 languages? She's going to teach me French words." The interruption, innocent as it was, diffused the tension. Even Mrs. Patterson seemed reluctant to show anger toward the child. "The meeting is at 2 o'clock, she said stiffly before walking away. "You don't speak French," Dawson said to Leona with a raised eyebrow once Mrs. Patterson was out of earshot. "Actually, I do," Leona replied with a small smile. "Along with Latin. The benefits of an expensive education my father insisted upon." Martha laughed. "Oh, I like you, Leona Blackwell. You're going to bring some much-needed sophistication to this dusty town." The council meeting that afternoon was held in the back room of Sullivan's General Store, the closest thing Tonopah had to a town hall. Word had spread quickly, and the small space was crowded with townspeople curious about the outcome. Mrs. Patterson called the meeting to order with obvious satisfaction at being the center of attention. We are here to address the matter of the teaching position. As you know, Miss Blackwell was offered the position before certain facts about her background came to light. Dawson, sitting beside Leona at the front, leaned forward. What facts would those be exactly? That she's qualified, educated, willing to take on a position that's been vacant for months. You know very well what I mean, Mr. Forster, Mrs. Patterson replied coldly. This town has standards to maintain. Then let's be direct, Leona said, rising to her feet. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. The concern is that my mother was Cherokee. I won't deny my heritage, nor will I apologize for it. What I will say is this. I came to Tonopah because I believe every child deserves an education. I can provide that education. Judge me on my abilities, not on circumstances of birth I could not control. A murmur ran through the crowd. Mrs. Patterson's face hardened. The issue isn't just your background, it's the example you set. How can parents trust their children to someone who isn't like them? Like them how? Dawson challenged. Educated, moral, dedicated, or do you mean white? The blunt question hung in the air. From the back of the room, a voice spoke up. Sarah Miller, standing nervously but resolute. My children need teaching, she said. Miss Blackwell knows how to help children like my Jacob. I say we give her a chance. Another voice joined in. Howard Gibson from the newspaper. Tonopah wants to be seen as a progressive town. What message does it send if we turn away a qualified teacher over something so trivial? Trivial, Mrs. Patterson sputtered. Our values should include education for our children, Martha Forster interrupted. And basic Christian decency toward a woman who's traveled across the country to help our community. The debate grew heated, with opinions called out from all corners. Throughout it all, Leona remained standing, her posture straight, her expression composed despite the painful scrutiny. Finally, Reverend Collins raised his voice above the others. Perhaps we should put it to a vote, democratic principles being what they are. Mrs. Patterson looked as though she'd bitten into something sour but could hardly object to such a reasonable suggestion. Very well. All those in favor of rescinding Miss Blackwell's position, raise your hands. A handful of hands went up. Mrs. Patterson's, 2 council members, and a few others. Those in favor of honoring the original agreement and allowing Miss Blackwell to assume her duties as school teacher. To Leona's astonishment, at least 2/3 of the room raised their hands, not just Dawson and his allies, but many townspeople she hadn't yet met. The ayes have it, Reverend Collins announced with poorly concealed satisfaction. Miss Blackwell will begin teaching tomorrow as planned. As the crowd dispersed, Dawson squeezed Leona's hand. What did I tell you? One family at a time. It's just a vote, Leona cautioned. Hearts and minds take longer to change. But it's a start, he replied, and Tonopah just might surprise you yet. That night, Leona prepared her lessons with renewed determination. The vote had granted her the position, but she would need to earn the town's respect through her work. She would prove herself not just adequate, but exceptional, giving the children of Tonopah an education that would rival any back east. Monday morning dawned clear and cool. Leona arrived at the schoolhouse early, arranging books and writing a welcome message on the freshly cleaned blackboard. Her heart pounded with anticipation and anxiety as the hour approached. Would anyone actually come? At 5 minutes before 9, the first wagon arrived. The Millers, with Jacob and Emma scrubbed clean and nervous. Next came the Rodriguez boy, Miguel, escorting his younger siblings. Then more children, some accompanied by parents watching warily, others arriving alone with curious faces. By 9 o'clock, 15 students ranging from 6 to 16 had filled the desks. Leona recognized Lily Forster's bright face among them. "Good morning," Leona began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm Miss Blackwell, and I'm honored to be your teacher." From the doorway came a deep voice. "Looks like you've got a full house." Leona turned to see Dawson leaning against the doorframe, hat in hand. Behind him stood several more children with uncertain expressions. "The Hendersons changed their minds," he explained with a wink. "And the Johnsons decided education trumps prejudice after all." By the end of that first day, 23 students had enrolled nearly every school-aged child in Tonopah. Leona's hands were chalky, her throat dry from hours of instruction, but her heart was full. She had connected with these children, seen their minds engage, watched even the reluctant ones begin to participate. As she was closing up the schoolhouse, Dawson returned, Lily by his side. "How was your first day?" he asked, though his smile suggested he already knew the answer. "Exhausting." "Exhilarating. Everything I hoped for," Leona admitted, "though I suspect some parents will still need convincing." "Maybe," Dawson agreed, "but you've already won over the most important people." He nodded toward Lily, who was proudly showing her father the spelling test she'd aced. "The children will take your lessons home, along with their impressions of you. That'll do more than any town meeting." The following weeks proved him right. As September rolled into October, Leona settled into a routine. Each day brought new challenges and small victories, Jacob Miller beginning to recognize words, the older students advancing in mathematics, the youngest learning to write their names. More significantly, the town's attitude began to shift. Parents who had initially been reluctant now greeted her on the street. Mrs. Sullivan at the general store saved educational materials she thought might be useful. Even Mrs. Patterson's open hostility faded to cool civility as reports of the school's success spread. Dawson remained her staunchest ally, regularly checking on the schoolhouse and offering assistance. Their friendship deepened through shared meals at the ranch, discussions of books and education, and his unwavering support when challenges arose. One afternoon in late October, Leona was teaching the older children about geography when the schoolhouse door burst open. A miner named Clancy stumbled in, his face pale. "Accident at the Silver Strike mine," he gasped. "Cave in. Men trapped. Need everyone who can help." The children's faces filled with fear. Many had fathers or brothers working the mines. Leona quickly took control of the situation. "Class dismissed," she announced calmly. "Older children, escort the younger ones directly home. Miguel, please take Lily to the Forster ranch immediately." As the children hurried out, Leona grabbed her shawl. "How bad is it, Mr. Clancy?" "Bad, madam. At least 12 men unaccounted for. Doc's already headed out there, but they need every pair of hands." Without hesitation, Leona followed him. The mine lay a mile from town, and by the time they arrived, a crowd had gathered at the entrance. Dust-covered miners emerged carrying injured comrades. Women wept as they searched for their husbands and sons among the rescued. Leona spotted Dawson organizing a group of men to shore up the damaged tunnel. His shirt was torn, his face streaked with dirt and sweat as he directed the rescue effort. "What can I do?" she asked, approaching him. Surprise registered on his face, followed quickly by appreciation for her practical response. "Doc needs help with the injured. Over there." He pointed to where the town doctor was overwhelmed with wounded miners. For the next several hours, Leona worked alongside the doctor, tearing strips of cloth for bandages, cleaning wounds, and offering comfort to the injured men. Some were surprised to see the schoolteacher in such circumstances, but none rejected her help. As night fell, lanterns were lit around the mine entrance. 9 men had been rescued, 3 had been found dead, and 3 remained missing, including Tomas Rodriguez. Miguel's father. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived at the mine, her face etched with fear as she clutched her rosary. Leona went to her immediately, putting an arm around the woman's shoulders. "They're still searching," she assured her in halting Spanish she'd been learning from Miguel. "Dawson won't stop until everyone is found." As if summoned by her words, a commotion arose at the mine entrance. Miners emerged carrying 3 soot-covered figures all alive, though badly injured. Among them was Tomás Rodriguez, unconscious but breathing. The night became a blur of activity, the injured transported to town, families reunited, the dead respectfully covered and moved to the undertakers. Through it all, Leona worked without complaint, her fine clothes ruined, her hands blistered from helping move debris and carry supplies. It was nearly dawn when Dawson found her sitting exhausted on an overturned crate, staring at the lightening sky. "You should get some rest," he said gently, offering her a cup of coffee. "You've done more than anyone could have asked." Leona accepted the coffee gratefully. "I couldn't leave while people needed help." "No," he agreed, sitting beside her. "You couldn't. That's who you are." He studied her face, his expression softening. "You know, when you first arrived, I defended you because it was the right thing to do, because I knew what it was like to be judged unfairly." "And now?" Leona asked, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, of the warmth in his blue eyes. "Now I defend you because I know you, because you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met." His voice dropped lower. "Because seeing you here tonight, covered in dust and blood but still helping others, made me realize something I've been trying to deny for weeks." Leona's heart quickened. "What's that?" "That I'm falling in love with you, Leona Blackwell," he said simply. "And it terrifies me." The confession hung between them, unexpected yet somehow inevitable. Leona knew she should be cautious. She'd been in Tonopah barely 2 months, was still establishing herself, still facing prejudice from some quarters. But in that moment, with the first light of dawn touching Dawson's weary face, honesty seemed the only possible response. "It terrifies me too," she admitted, "but not enough to deny what I feel." Dawson's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. They sat in silence as the sun rose over the mines, illuminating a town that had faced tragedy together and emerged stronger for it. In the days following the mine accident, something shifted in Tonopah. The shared experience of tragedy and rescue had broken down barriers, reminded everyone of their common humanity. Leona found herself greeted warmly by townspeople who had previously avoided her. The mothers of her students brought food to the schoolhouse, thanking her for her help during the crisis. Most significantly, Mrs. Rodriguez, whose husband was recovering slowly, came to the school one afternoon with a gift, a beautiful hand-embroidered shawl. "For our teacher," she said, her English improving through practice with Leona, "for helping save my Tomás, for teaching my Miguel." She hesitated, then added, "for being one of us now." The words echoed what Dawson had declared that first day, but now they carried the weight of acceptance, not just tolerance, but genuine inclusion. As October turned to November, Leona's relationship with Dawson deepened, though both were careful to maintain propriety in a town where gossip traveled faster than stagecoaches. They shared Sunday dinners at his ranch, rode together to check on families affected by the mine accident, and spent evenings discussing books while Lily practiced her reading nearby. Martha Forster observed their growing attachment with obvious approval. "My brother has been half alive since Catherine died," she told Leona one afternoon as they prepared dinner together. "You've brought him back to himself." "I'm not trying to replace Catherine," Leona said carefully. "Of course not," Martha replied. "No one could." "But love isn't a limited resource, Leona. There's room in a heart for memories of one love and the reality of another. As Thanksgiving approached, the town planned a community celebration, the first such event since the mine accident. To Leona's surprise, she was asked to help organize the gathering, a clear sign of her acceptance into Tonopah's social fabric. The day before Thanksgiving, as school dismissed early, Dawson arrived on horseback. "Ride with me," he asked, holding the reins of a second horse. "There's something I want to show you." They rode beyond the town, past his ranch, into the hills that cradled Tonopah. The landscape was stark but beautiful: sagebrush and juniper, rock formations rising from the earth like nature's sculptures. Eventually, they reached a promontory overlooking the valley, the town a collection of tiny structures in the distance. "Catherine and I used to come here," Dawson said as they dismounted. "It was her favorite place. She said you could see forever from this spot." Leona stood quietly, understanding the significance of his bringing her to this place. "It's beautiful. I haven't been back since she died," he admitted. "Couldn't face it, but today it felt right." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Leona, when you came to Tonopah, I was still half living in the past, focused on Lily on the ranch but not really looking forward. And now," she asked softly, "now I find myself making plans again, thinking about the future." His eyes held her steadily. "A future I hope includes you." Leona's heart soared, but caution tempered her response. "Dawson, I care for you deeply, but we need to be realistic. The town has begun to accept me as their teacher, but your wife would have liked you enormously," he interrupted with certainty. "Catherine never cared what anyone thought. She followed her heart. That's what I'm doing now." He squeezed her hands. "I'm not proposing marriage, not yet. I know it's too soon. I'm just asking if you're willing to consider a future together when the time is right." Leona looked out over the valley, then back to the man before her, this steady, principled rancher who had defended her before he knew her, who had opened his heart after profound loss, who saw her completely and valued all that she was. "Yes," she said simply. "When the time is right, I would be honored to build a future with you." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the hills. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle, questioning kiss that deepened as she responded. In that moment, high above Tonopah with the wind whispering around them, Leona felt a certainty she had never known before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The Thanksgiving celebration brought nearly every resident of Tonopah to the town square. Tables laden with food stretched in long rows, lanterns were strung between buildings, and even the weather cooperated with an unusually mild November day. Leona arrived with freshly baked pies, dressed in her best autumn dress with her hair arranged more elaborately than her usual teaching style. The transformation from the dusty, travel-worn woman who had arrived in September to the confident, well-respected teacher she had become was not lost on the townspeople. "Miss Blackwell," her students called, running to greet her. "Did you bring your apple pies?" "As promised," she laughed, allowing them to take the desserts to the appropriate table. Dawson found her minutes later, Lily at his side wearing a new dress clearly made for the occasion. "You look beautiful," he said, his admiration evident. "As do you, Miss Lily," Leona added, bending to straighten the girl's collar. "Aunt Martha says I'm growing too fast," Lily replied with the practicality of a 10-year-old. "Are you going to sit with us for dinner?" "I would be delighted," Leona replied, exchanging a warm glance with Dawson over the child's head. The celebration began with Reverend Collins offering a prayer of thanksgiving for the town's survival and prosperity, despite the mine accident. As people filled their plates and found seats, Leona was struck by how naturally she was included in conversations, how many genuine smiles were directed her way. Even Mrs. Patterson, who had maintained a cool distance since being outvoted about the teaching position, offered a stiff nod of acknowledgement as they passed each other. After the meal, as musicians set up for dancing, Howard Gibson from the newspaper approached their table. "Miss Blackwell, I wonder if I might have a word," he asked. "I'm preparing an article about the school's progress under your leadership." As Leona stepped aside to speak with him, she noticed Mrs. Patterson approaching Dawson with a determined expression. Though she couldn't hear their conversation, the older woman's body language suggested confrontation rather than Thanksgiving fellowship. When Gibson finished his questions, Leona returned to find Dawson alone, his expression troubled. "What did Mrs. Patterson want?" she asked quietly. "To warn me," he replied, his voice tight. "Apparently, several people have noticed our friendship. She feels it's inappropriate for the town's most prominent rancher to be consorting with," he broke off, jaw clenching, "with the half-breed schoolteacher." Leona finished for him, keeping her voice steady despite the sting of the words. "I told her my personal life was none of her concern," Dawson said, "but she implied that the school board might reconsider your position if we continue to see each other." Leona's stomach tightened. She had worked so hard to build respect in Tonopah, to prove herself as an educator. The thought of losing her position not because of her heritage or qualifications, but because of whom she chose to care for was infuriating. "What do you want to do?" Dawson asked, watching her carefully. Before Leona could answer, music filled the square as the dancing began. Couples moved to the center, forming lines for a Virginia reel. "I want to dance," she said suddenly, lifting her chin. "With you, right now, in front of everyone." Surprise flashed across Dawson's face, followed by a slow smile of understanding. "Are you sure? It would be a public statement." "I'm tired of hiding what I feel to appease people like Mrs. Patterson," Leona replied. "If the town wants to judge us for finding happiness together, then perhaps it's not the home I thought it was becoming." Dawson stood, offering his hand with a formal bow that made her laugh despite the tension. "Miss Blackwell, may I have the honor of this dance?" "You may indeed, Mr. Forster," she replied, placing her hand in his. As they joined the dancers, heads turned. Whispers rippled through the gathering. But Leona held her head high, moving through the steps of the reel with grace born of her Philadelphia upbringing. Dawson matched her easily, his eyes never leaving hers as they turned and circled. When the dance ended, they remained hand in hand, making their statement clear to all who watched. From across the square, Leona saw Martha give them a thumbs up while Lily clapped delightedly. More surprisingly, she noticed Mrs. Miller nudge her husband and nod approvingly. The Rodriguez family, Tomás still moving carefully from his injuries, smiled warmly. Even Howard Gibson was scribbling in his notebook with evident interest. "Well," Dawson murmured as they walked back toward their table, "that should give the gossips something to talk about." "Do you regret it?" Leona asked, suddenly uncertain. "Not for a moment," he replied, squeezing her hand. "Though I suspect we'll both be having some interesting conversations in the coming days." He was right. The following week brought a flurry of reactions to their public declaration. Some townspeople offered congratulations, seeming genuinely pleased. Others maintained a pointed silence that spoke volumes. Mrs. Patterson and her allies whispered behind fans and gloves, shooting disapproving glances whenever Leona passed. But the expected summons from the school board never materialized. Instead, on Friday afternoon as classes ended, Reverend Collins appeared at the schoolhouse. "Miss Blackwell," he greeted her as the last students departed. "I wonder if I might have a word." Leona braced herself, assuming he had come to address the propriety of her relationship with Dawson. "Of course, Reverend. Please sit." To her surprise, he smiled warmly. "I wanted to tell you that the Christmas Pageant Planning Committee would be honored if you would direct this year's program. The children speak so highly of your lessons in elocution and poetry. We thought you'd be perfect for the role." Stunned by the unexpected offer, traditionally a position of honor given to a respected community member, Leona stammered her acceptance. "Excellent," the Reverend said, rising to leave. Then, more quietly, "And Miss Blackwell, I was pleased to see you and Dawson Forster enjoying the Thanksgiving celebration together. This town has caused that man enough pain with their prejudices. It's good to see him happy again." As December arrived with crisp air and occasional dustings of snow, Leona threw herself into preparations for the Christmas pageant. The children practiced diligently, excited to perform for their families. Even the most reluctant students participated enthusiastically, caught up in the holiday spirit. Dawson and Lily often stayed after school to help with preparations, building simple props, helping younger children learn their lines, offering encouragement when frustrations mounted. These afternoons took on a domestic quality that Leona found increasingly precious, the three of them working together, sharing laughter and creativity, becoming something that felt remarkably like family. One evening, as they walked back to the boarding house after a particularly productive rehearsal, Dawson broached a subject they had been circling for weeks. "Leona, I've been thinking about what happens after the holidays," he began, his breath visible in the cold air. "You've been at Mrs. Rodriguez's for months now. It can't be very comfortable." "It's been perfectly adequate," she replied, though in truth the small room had begun to feel constraining. "Mrs. Rodriguez has been wonderfully kind." "I'm sure she has," Dawson agreed. "But I wondered if you might consider another arrangement." Leona's step faltered. "What sort of arrangement?" "Martha is returning to Sacramento after Christmas," he explained. "Her husband's business is finally settled, and she's eager to get back to her own home. That means Lily will be without a woman's guidance at the ranch." "Dawson, are you asking me to be my wife?" he finished plainly. "Yes, Leona, I am. I love you. I think you love me too, and Lily adores you." He stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "I know it's sooner than we discussed. I know there will be talk, but I don't want to waste any more time worrying about what others think." Leona's heart raced. She had known this moment was coming, had felt their relationship building toward it with a beautiful inevitability. Yet hearing the words spoken aloud, a direct proposal of marriage, made the reality of it suddenly overwhelming. "What about the school?" she asked, practical concerns pushing forward. "The board might not approve of a married teacher." "Howard Gibson tells me the town council is considering making the teaching position permanent with increased funding," Dawson replied. "They've been impressed with the children's progress. I don't think they'd jeopardize that, regardless of your marital status. And if they do, then we'll face it together," he said simply. "The ranch is doing well. You could open a private school if necessary, or we could move to a more progressive town." His expression grew serious. "I won't pretend it would be easy, Leona. There will always be people who disapprove of us. But I believe what we could build together is worth facing those challenges." Snow began to fall softly around them, the flakes catching in Leona's dark hair. In that moment, standing on the quiet street with Tonopah's windows glowing with lamplight, the future seemed to open before her, not the safe, conventional path she had once envisioned, but something richer, more challenging, and infinitely more rewarding. "Yes," she said, her voice clear in the winter air. "I will marry you, Dawson Forster." His smile was brilliant as he pulled her into an embrace, lifting her briefly off her feet in his excitement. When he set her down, he reached into his pocket and produced a small box. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment," he admitted, opening it to reveal a ring, not an ostentatious diamond, but an elegant band set with a deep blue sapphire. "It was my grandmother's. Martha insisted I should give it to you." As he slipped it onto her finger, Leona felt a sense of rightness, of coming home at last. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, the Eastern school teacher and the Western rancher who had defied convention and found love across the divisions that separated them. The Christmas pageant became a celebration not just of the season, but of Tonopah's evolution as a community. The schoolhouse was packed with families, miners sitting alongside merchants, ranch hands beside business owners, all united in pride for their performing children. Leona watched from the side as the students presented the nativity story with earnest solemnity, recited poems with careful precision, and sang carols with enthusiastic, if not always tuneful voices. Lily Forster, playing the angel Gabriel, delivered her lines flawlessly, beaming with pride when she caught her father's eye in the audience. At the conclusion, Reverend Collins called Leona forward to receive the town's thanks. As she stood before the gathering, the same faces that had once looked at her with suspicion now offered applause and appreciation. "Miss Blackwell has brought more than education to our town," the Reverend announced. "She has brought dedication, compassion, and a reminder that what unites us is far stronger than what divides us." From the audience, Dawson caught her eye, his expression conveying everything words could not: pride, love, certainty in their shared future. After the pageant, as families mingled and enjoyed refreshments, Mrs. Patterson approached Leona. The older woman's face was set in its usual stern lines, but something in her eyes had softened slightly. "The children performed admirably," she said stiffly. "You've done well with them." Coming from Mrs. Patterson, it was high praise indeed. "Thank you," Leona replied sincerely. "They worked very hard." "I understand congratulations are in order," Mrs. Patterson continued, glancing at the ring on Leona's finger. "Mr. Forster is a fortunate man." Before Leona could respond, the woman added more quietly, "I may not approve of every decision made in this town, Miss Blackwell, but I cannot deny that the children have benefited from your presence. I trust that won't change after your marriage." With that remarkable concession, she moved away, leaving Leona stunned but grateful for even this small shift in the woman's attitude. Later that evening, as they celebrated at the ranch with Martha, Lily, and a few close friends, Dawson proposed a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "And to the woman who reminded a skeptical town that belonging isn't about where you're from or who your parents were. It's about what you contribute, how you love, and the community you help create." "To Leona," Martha added, "who turned a temporary position into a permanent home." As glasses clinked and congratulations flowed, Leona felt the truth of their words. In just 4 months, she had traveled from rejection to acceptance, from isolation to connection, from uncertainty to love. The journey had not been easy, but standing in the warmth of the ranch house surrounded by those who had become her family, she knew it had led exactly where she was meant to be. The wedding took place on New Year's Day, 1883, a symbolic fresh start for both Leona and Dawson. The ceremony was held at the church, with Reverend Collins officiating before a congregation that included most of Tonopah's residents. Lily stood proudly beside them, officially gaining not just a stepmother but a mother in all the ways that mattered. Leona wore a gown of ivory satin that Martha had helped her select on a special trip to Carson City. Around her neck hung her mother's locket, a bridge between her past and her future. As she spoke her vows, Her voice was clear and confident, filling the small church with the certainty of her choice. The celebration afterwards spilled from the church to the town square, becoming a community event that lasted well into the evening. Even the miners who had once been skeptical of the Eastern schoolteacher raised glasses to toast her happiness. As dusk fell and the party continued, Dawson led Leona away from the crowds, toward the waiting carriage that would take them home to Silver Creek Ranch, now her home as well. "Happy?" he asked, helping her into the carriage. "More than I ever imagined possible," she replied honestly. "When I arrived here, I thought the best I could hope for was tolerance. I never dreamed I would find acceptance or love. This town didn't know what it was getting when you stepped off that stagecoach," Dawson said, taking the reins. "But I think they're beginning to understand." He nodded toward the town square where their guests continued the celebration. "You've changed Tonopah, Leona, for the better." As they drove toward the ranch in the gathering darkness, Leona thought of all that had transpired since that fateful day in September. She had arrived a stranger, unwelcome and unwanted. She had persevered through rejection, proven herself through dedication, and found her place not by hiding who she was but by embracing it fully. And Dawson, the man who had defended her before he knew her, who had loved her for exactly who she was, had stood beside her through it all, challenging a town's prejudices with the simple truth that had become their shared conviction. She is part of us now. The road ahead would not always be smooth. There would be challenges, setbacks, and those who would never fully accept their union. But as the lights of Silver Creek Ranch appeared in the distance, Leona Forster knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home, not just a physical place, but a belonging of the heart that transcended all boundaries. In the years that followed, the story of the Eastern schoolteacher and the Western rancher became part of Tonopah's lore. How a woman told she could never belong had transformed a town through perseverance and integrity. How love had bridged divides thought impassable. How a community had grown stronger by embracing difference rather than fearing it. Leona continued teaching, eventually establishing a proper school building with multiple classrooms as Tonopah grew. Dawson expanded the ranch, implementing innovative practices that brought prosperity to the region. Lily blossomed under Leona's guidance, eventually following in her stepmother's footsteps to become a teacher herself. And when, 2 years after their wedding, Leona gave birth to twins, a boy with his father's blue eyes and a girl with her mother's spirit, the entire town celebrated their arrival as if they were everyone's children. For they were born of a love that had challenged assumptions, broken down barriers, and proven that belonging was never about bloodlines or backgrounds, but about the connections forged through courage, compassion, and the willingness to see beyond differences to the humanity that unites us all. In Tonopah, Nevada, the Forster family story became more than just a romance. It became a testament to the possibility of change, the power of acceptance, and the enduring truth that hearts, like minds, can grow when given the chance to overcome the limitations of the past and embrace the promise of a shared future.